The Catholic Morning Show on Iowa Catholic Radio.
You're back here with Catholic Morning Show. I'm Bo Bonner, Elise Kerr, Aidan Pugh, and Alexia Baker. Happy you're back with us. I hope you got a chance to listen to that message from Bishop. Thank you, Bishop Johnson. What a wonderful way to start out our week here on Iowa Catholic Radio, hearing that Easter message full of joy. Make sure to join us tomorrow. We'll be speaking with John Gaffney and Wesley Hayes. You won't want to miss that. We are about 15 minutes away from the top of the new hour. Let's turn to our second interview of the day. Hans Platte, founder and president of Vinea Research, speaking about a new, first of its kind national study on confession among Catholics. Hans, thank you for coming on the Catholic Morning Show.
Good morning, Bo. Happy to be here.
Wonderful to have you with us. So before we get to the survey itself, can you tell us a little bit about Catholic Pulse and the Vinea Research and what you guys are attempting to do as a group when it comes to finding out information about Catholics here in the United States?
Yes, good. Happy to start there. So my background is in commercial research, so doing strategic research for other companies to help them better understand the groups that they're trying to sell to, whether it's a product or a service. And what we wanted to do a few years ago, I guess the idea came to our hearts to take what we do in the business world and apply it to Catholic organizations to really help us not just know statistics about Catholics, the percent who do this or percent who do that, but really try to understand like a business mindset, what drives people to do these different things and how do we get them to better embrace their faith or come closer to Christ, et cetera. And so, last year we formed a nonprofit called Vinea Research Group, and the premier flagship offering, I guess, is going to be called the Catholic Pulse Report, which will be, ultimately, we're going to make it a quarterly set of studies around a number of different topics. I mean, the first one was on confession, but there's a very healthy pipeline of topics that we can study to just better understand the church, the Catholics in the church, so that we can do a better job of reaching them.
Well, I think this is very timely. I think sometimes people will hear and maybe are used to something like the Pew report, or there's a few sort of reports that on one hand hit the sort of national news that people hear, and even a few of them that get into religious practice and maybe Catholic aspects. But otherwise, sometimes people just they go off of intuition, or maybe they see a news report. When it comes to trying to find the truth as best as we can about what's going on among Catholics, that seems like something that there really is a need and a hunger for. What brought you to go, this is exactly the time to try to found a research group like this, and what motivated maybe the first report about confession?
Well, I've been working on this for about 10 years, for the most part working with apostolates, a little bit with the church proper, just trying to get them to understand a little bit about the value of strategic, insights-oriented research. And it just felt like it was time. There was something around the election of Pope Leo, I think, that really kind of helped to have this particular effort take off. There's so much attention on the church in the U.S. in particular, given his American roots. And, we just felt like I said, this was the time to do it. And we chose confession. There were a couple of reasons for it. Actually, you mentioned Pew. I think Pew is a lot of the reasons that we're doing this. I did a study about a year ago on the real presence that kind of, revealed ways that the Pew study was lacking, right? It wasn't really, they're not Catholic oriented. And so that kind of showed a little bit in how the survey was worded. But they did come out with a study last year that showed that, I think it was 75% of Catholics do not go to confession at all. And so that struck us as like a really significant number. And then the other thing that was happening around the same time was the National Eucharistic Revival. And, obviously the big event was the Congress in Indianapolis. And closely linked to the Eucharist is confession. And so a couple of different things kind of came together to point us to confession as being the lead study here. And the fact that we're, when we released it, it was, mid-Lent. And here we are into the Easter season now. And, hopefully we can work with, the positive feelings and spirituality from, the wonderful celebration into wanting to grow our faith, and including frequent confession.
Well, I don't want to launch broadsides against how people have been surveying religion for a while, and you probably know better than me, but I think what you're pointing out is very telling. It's one thing to sort of ask what people do, like, so, the sort of surface level, do you go to church this much? Do you go to confession this much? Very intriguing that you guys sort of went at least a level or two down and said, well, why not? Or do you think you'll never want to go again? Like, you can. I'll leave it to you to like point out some of these realities. But just to glom onto another news reality that has really hit the news, which is to say, in the United States and different parts of the developed world, this was one of the largest Easters for people coming into the church that has happened in a long time. And I have to say that if you followed things like the Pew surveys, it really surprised a lot of people. But precisely probably because maybe the whole, like you said, the type of questions that you could ask that might prove to be more fruitful sometimes evade some of these more surface level surveys. Do you feel that might be one of the major differences between what you guys are trying to do and the sort of information that we've heard maybe the past decade or so?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the narrative around Catholicism driven by secular research groups is somewhat negative, right? It's only a third believe in the real presence. A really high percentage want the church to change its teachings and have, female priests and, all sorts of things that, we can't do. And all of it seems to be negatively oriented. I'm not necessarily looking to manufacture hope in the studies that we do, but I do think that when you do studies that are well-rounded and come from a faithful Catholic perspective, that there is a lot of hope that's out there. And so I think it's surprising. What we're seeing now is in the church is surprising, given what you said, all of the somewhat negativity that we see with secular research on Catholics. But I think there's always been some positivity. I mean, beyond a silver lining. And I think the confession study was, really pointed that out with the whole finding that 2/3 want to come back to confession. Two-thirds of Catholics who haven't been in the past year, at least showed some level of openness to coming back to confession, which is a remarkable finding. I mean, it speaks to the fact that people have more drifted away from confession than people have outright rejected it.
Right.
Which is great. So what's lacking is some catechesis, invitation for sure, and just helping them to find their way back to the sacrament.
Well, forgive me for editorializing a bit on your guys' wonderful study. It makes me think of something else that occurs. So when some of these reports about how big this Easter coal was going to be, you immediately got pushed back. But yeah, guys, but still, loads and loads of Catholics are leaving the faith, and that's outpacing even the growth. But I think that what your survey shows is it's actually a bad way to think with Catholicism, that like people are like, they flip a light switch and they're done with confession or they're done with the church. I mean, like half the books written in the 20th century was people like converting on their deathbeds or coming back way later or understanding themselves as Catholic, but just like, in a sort of complicated way. I think your confession study shows that we're even approaching some of this wrong, that it's not that people have, turned out the lights on confession never to return, but that there's a lot that goes into why someone might not be approaching confession. And if that's the case, not only, like you said, is it this call for an evangelical push, like to our own people already in the pews about the beauty of confession and what's going on, but that there's actually going to need to be a multi-pronged approach to helping people come back. And it's not simply people giving up on a quote-unquote old practice like confession.
No, yeah, I completely agree. Multi-prong is a great way of putting it. I think this study is a study that needs to be studied, right? In other words, there are some clear surface level findings around why people don't go and why people do go. Not surface level, but I mean just items that clearly emerge as drivers and barriers. But I think that's a start, right? I think that we need to look at the rest of the findings because there's a lot more to it. It's definitely, the barriers in particular are definitely multidimensional. Actually, the attractors are as well. There's a lot of them, especially around fruits. We don't really talk about the fruits associated with confession, right? So what do you get from going to confession? Obviously, you get the knowledge of your sins being forgiven and the knowledge of absolution and some of the feelings that come along with that. But there are also these fruits around peace, interior healing, desire to grow in your faith and become more spiritually well-rounded. And I think in particular for people who don't go to confession, I think we need to speak to some of those benefits or reasons for going. Obviously, you go for absolution, right? And that's important in your walk with Christ and in the Catholic community. But I think there are these other fruits that people don't really think about, and I think that's something that we were, I guess, hoping to see. I mean, you never know what you're going to see, but we were glad to see that there were so many fruits identified through the research.
Well, look, it's a fantastic study. We've only got to the tip of the iceberg. So before we let you go, where can people go find not only this survey and the report, but all of the work that is beginning with Vinea Research that you guys are beginning?
Yeah. So this report is going to be found at catholicpulsereport.org. org. And then if you go to VineaResearch.com, there are other studies that we've done in the past, just a couple of others, one on COVID, one on the real presence, that I think are just a little helpful. I mean, this is definitely the flagship one, the confession study. And so hopefully we'll be, in the near future, adding more studies to this particular topic.
Well, it's absolutely brilliant work. It is. It's like you said, something that needs to be chewed on. The study needs to be studied. I'm hoping that it bears many fruits, not only with this study particularly, but in the future with doing further studies and research like this. It is grade A stuff, and we're so glad that you guys are doing it, and we're very glad that you came here on the Catholic Morning Show. Hans Platté, founder and president of Vinea Research, the CatholicPulseReport.org, this first nationwide study talking about confession. Hans, thank you for coming on the Catholic Morning Show.
Listen to the Catholic Morning Show weekdays at 7 a.m. Central on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, iowacatholicradio.com, or the Iowa Catholic Radio app.